Hey, how's it going? Listen, about tonight's game. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. I just have a whole bunch of work. I'm totally swamped. My mom came into town completely unexpectedly, and I also have a cold. So yeah, sorry, I can't make the game tonight. Thanks. Hey everyone, my name's Joe. Welcome to Tabletop Theory, where we talk about things like counseling theory, educational theory, and how putting those things together can help you become a better game master, storyteller, and role player. Today, we're going to talk about something that is a pretty common frustration among a lot of people that I've talked to who are in the role-playing game hobby, and that's player no-shows, or games getting canceled, or generally speaking, the game not going off when you expect it to. Players cancel at the last minute all the time, and it can leave you with a couple of questions. Should the game master feel bad about the situation and how it played out with the players not showing up? What can the game master do in order to avoid this from happening in the future? Is putting the big campaign off the right decision to make, and if it is the right decision, when do you finally make that call? Well, the short version is no, the game master shouldn't feel bad. Putting the campaign on hold may be the right decision, and you might be able to do something to help in the future with your players not showing up. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to give you a few strategies and tips for how I like to deal with this when my players decide that they may not show up. Sometimes they may tell me in advance, and sometimes it could be 5 minutes before the game starts. So let's get started. So first and foremost, I try to establish norms with my players right before we begin play. So this means if it's session 0 and this is the first time I'm meeting my players, I try to make sure that I establish what I call the 2/3 rule. Now, the 2/3 rule is basically I take a total count of all the players that are going to be involved in the game, and then I establish what would be a 2/3 of the players that would be present. Let me try to explain this a little bit differently because I went to art school, I'm not great at math. So the 2/3 rule is what I put in place to help my players understand when I will be canceling the main campaign for that evening. Now that doesn't mean I'm going to be canceling play altogether, it just means the big campaign is put on hold. So that means if I have 6 players and more than 2 of them are absent, I'm going to put the campaign on hold because that would mean that half or more than 2/3 of my players are going to be missing. So if you have 4 players, this would be more than 1 player missing. If you have 6 players, this is more than 2 players. You kind of get the idea. If you have more than 2/3 of your players actually absent when you're going to play the big campaign, to me, that basically means that I need to decide to choose a different thing to do on that night. This isn't meant to be an ultimatum either. It's just a way for your players to know that you have a limit, and whenever enough people are absent, that limit is basically going to be put into place, and you can still play, it just won't be the main campaign. And it's also important to remember not to guilt anybody whenever they miss, because people are complex. They're going to be missing games from time to time because life happens, and that's all right. The other thing to keep in mind is that in the example with 6 players and you have 2 players missing, and if one more player is going to miss, you know you have to cancel the game for the evening. Try your very best not to put that type of expectation on the player that might tip the scales over the 2/3 limit, because it's kind of harsh to be a player in that situation to feel like, oh, well, if 2 other people are missing, I may not want to go because I don't want to play with just the players that are left, or I might want to wait till all the players are present before we can play. It might seem like you're coming up with excuses not to play, but the important thing to remember is that it's not meant to be an obligation, it's just meant to be something fun that you do. Role-playing games aren't supposed to be a job, for most of us. Sometimes they are. For me, periodically it is. As a game master, you probably want to be able to tell the story on your time so that you can keep the game going and keep your players interested. But it's important to remember that, just like I said with not guilting the final player who might tip you over the 2/3 limit, you probably want to try to keep some perspective about what the whole story is and all of the people that are involved in it. Because even though you might want to tell the story on your own time, the players not being there isn't something that you can predict. And honestly, that unpredictability is what makes RPGs so fun. The fact that you're not really going to know what players are going to do next. And sometimes that unpredictability extends to people not being able to attend the game sessions. So if your players can't stick around because they have to leave early because they have to deal with jobs or family or kids, or they cancel at the last minute, it's okay. As people get older and have more responsibilities, It just means that it gets a little tougher sometimes to schedule games. So if you're a game master and people cancel, try to make sure that you're looking at it from a holistic point of view. Even if some of the players can't make it, you can still play the game. No matter what you're doing, if you have a game night with your friends or your family that are scheduled to be there on Saturday nights, for example, just because you can't play the big game on a Saturday night, it doesn't mean that you can't play any games. You're going to have the capability to enjoy your time with the people that you care about, and honestly, role-playing games are just one thing that you can do to occupy that time. And just because the schedule didn't work out this one time, it doesn't mean that it's going to always be a failure. I've said a few times on this channel that you will always be able to find another game, and I generally believe that to be true. Over the long time that I've been doing this, whenever games have fallen apart or I haven't been able to make it to a session or a player has canceled on me at the last minute, there's always been another game. And I continue to believe that that's going to be true for all of you as well. However, it can be really hard to keep that type of disappointment at bay. You might have had a lot of things planned, you might have put a lot of work into this session, you might have thought that this is going to be the big night when you get to reveal the big bad guy or something like that. And when it doesn't happen, it can leave you with a sense of disappointment. It can leave you with a sense of feeling kind of let down. But remember, even though you've gone through all of the trouble to create that information, it doesn't mean that you're never going to get to use it again. You may be able to trot this information out for another group, or you just might have to wait for 1 week while everybody regroups and figures out what to do next. And speaking of what to do next, it's always important to keep an idea of what you want to use as a backup plan. So having a backup plan is something that I generally encourage every aspiring game master or veteran game master to have. For me, those backup plans oftentimes take the shape of meanwhile one-shots. And I've talked about this a couple of times before on the channel, but what meanwhile one-shots are, just to kind of condense it, are one-shot adventures that take place in the same universe as the main campaign. So if you're all playing your main campaign in Baltimore by night, then your one-shot is going to be taking place in another section of Baltimore, but with just different characters. But some of the different characters from the main campaign may make guest appearances. So those one-shots I do enjoy having, and it does help my players to feel like that there's going to be a continuation of the story, even though it may not be with their main characters. The game still does get played, it's just with a slightly smaller group of players, and honestly, that's been really fun when we've gotten a chance to do it. The other thing that you can run in the event of having some players be absent is combat training. Another thing I've talked about before, but what it means is basically you get to take your players and have them exercise some of the different things that they might get to use in game. Spells, weapons, armor, different situations, things they might want to fight. You can use that to your advantage to help your players feel a lot more comfortable in their characters when the main campaign gets back together. You can also have one-shot adventures that are pre-written and just ready to pick up. The key is that a backup plan is not supposed to take more time and energy than the main campaign for you to put together. So for me, meanwhiles are a lot easier for me because I've already sort of started to figure out all the machinations and the movements of all the NPCs in my main campaign world, so I already have some ideas for conflict that could be occurring off screen during the main campaign, which is where I tend to throw my players during those types of one-shots. Alternatively, if you have something like Lost Mines of Phandelver, if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, that's a pretty easy adventure to pick up and run with because A, it's part of the beginner set and most people have access to it, and B, you already have pre-written characters that are created for it that you can just pass out to the players that are in attendance. Those types of small adventures actually give you a chance to just kind of stretch your legs in maybe some new ways that you weren't prepared for, and it takes the load off whenever you have players that are absent but you still want to play the game. The important thing to remember is that these are supposed to be small, low-effort backup plans. You're not starting a new campaign, you're not trying to plan anything big and expansive. It's just supposed to be quick, easy things that you can pick up when somebody calls at the last minute and says, hey, sorry, can't make it. So when I'm starting a new campaign, maybe with the same players, maybe with different players, I do my best to try to lay out the expectations of time that are going to be required for my players to get through the adventure. I have the good fortune to be able to run games for some players at a university that I work at. Now, these players are students, so they basically have their lives and schedules dictated by the academic calendar. So that means that in the fall semester, their semester begins in August and it ends in December. And then for the spring semester, it begins in January and ends in May. This has given me the opportunity to organize my adventures into roughly 15-week seasons. And the thing about that that's very helpful to me is that whenever the players begin at the beginning of the semester, they know that they have about 15 weeks worth of content that they're going to need to get through. Now, on average, most of these groups usually end up only playing for about 13 to 12 different sessions as the semester goes forward, because some of the times there are things like holidays that get in the way, midterms, finals, but generally speaking, everybody gets to play at least 12 times during the semester. So it's helped me to organize the adventures to fit within the confines of those weeks. Now, for those of you that aren't playing in an academic setting, you probably can do something very similar, because the important part of that is to be able to organize all of the different things that you're going to be trying to accomplish during an adventure or maybe a part of the campaign into a specified amount of time. And the wonderful thing about that is if your players know how many weeks that they're going to need to commit to their schedules, say Saturday night, 8 o'clock, I'm gonna go play Dungeons & Dragons at Joe's house, they know that they're only gonna need to do that for about, 6 to 10 to 15 weeks, however many weeks that you all agree on that would be a good use of time and that everybody can actually attend. Because if you have groups that say they're only gonna meet for about 6 weeks, but then after 8 weeks, everybody wants to still meet, but people's schedules start to change, maybe it's a good time to reevaluate when people can meet. Maybe it's a good time to reevaluate how long people can meet for. Because what was good 8 months ago may not be good today. At the end of every semester, I actually get the chance to talk to my players, see how the scheduling worked out, and then before we start again the next semester, I have a meeting or I talk to them on Discord about, hey, what day of the week works for you? Does this day still work? Does it not work? Do we need to change it around? And we adjust the schedule accordingly, because it's unfair of me to assume that their schedules are going to be the same from semester to semester. So it would make sense that we change the meeting times for the games. For the most part, ever since I started doing that well before I was running these games professionally for the university, it's been very helpful because players actually want to know how long they're going to be playing for. Last but not least, it's really important to remember something. Try not to take player absences personally, because chances are their lack of attendance to a game isn't going to be your fault. It's probably going to be because of scheduling conflicts, people's families. You may have put a ton of effort into creating a wonderful game and a great campaign, but sometimes traffic happens. Sometimes people get flat tires. Sometimes people get sick. Sometimes people's kids get sick. All of those different things are just examples of stuff that I've had to deal with over the years, and I'm sure a lot of you have too. But the thing I have to remind myself is that those absences are not my fault. And it's not because I'm a bad storyteller. It's not because I'm a bad game master. It's not because I'm an experienced game master or an inexperienced game master. It's just because things happen, and that's okay. And if I can keep that in mind and try my very best not to take it personally if my players miss a session, then that's going to mean that I'm more prepared to run the games next time whenever people actually do show up. Because like I said before, there's always going to be a next time. So that's all I've got. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all being here today because I know this is a little bit of a short one, but at the same time, it's something that I did want to talk about because I feel like sometimes game masters do take player absences really personally. So if you feel like I forgot anything, or there's some tips that you'd like to share with other people about what you do whenever your players miss a session, feel free to leave them here in the comments section below, or you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Tabletop Theory 1. You can also listen to this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast content. And if you really want to support the growth of this channel, I encourage you to subscribe on YouTube and hit the like button. It helps the YouTube algorithm know what I'm doing and that it knows that you like it. Tell your friends, tell everybody else that if they want to come watch this, I would be happy to have them here and I would be happy to know what they think. I also want to extend a special thank you to the people that support this channel on a regular basis. You know who you are. And if you'd like to become one of them, you can head on over to Buy Me a Coffee. The link is down in the description and you can become a member for just $5 a month. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Mental health is one of those things that over the last 10 years or so, I've actually been really pleased to see how many people have actually started to become more comfortable seeking help and looking for help and understanding a little bit more about how many people really do need help whenever it comes to understanding and dealing with some of the issues that come from mental illness and needing help with mental health. However, sometimes our language can get the better of us because we've gotten stuck in the ways of using words that we've gotten comfortable with. Sometimes we might call something crazy, or nuts, or insane. those words can actually hurt, because in some cases, those words have been used to define people. And oftentimes that's not a very good feeling, especially if you feel like those words don't apply to you, but at the same time, people still keep using them. Words have power, and it's important to remember that. It's important to remember that those words have power not only when it comes to mental illness and mental health, but also race, ethnicity, background, gender. Please keep this in mind, because I want to make sure that we all try to leave the world a little bit better than we found it. And if all it takes is just being aware of the words that we use whenever we're talking to each other, I don't think that's so hard. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Take care, be kind, and have fun adventuring.